It was one of those sweltering summer afternoons in Oakwood Meadows, a seemingly perfect suburban enclave in central Florida, where palm trees swayed lazily and manicured lawns stretched like green carpets under the relentless sun. My name is Marcus Reynolds, and as the Assistant Commissioner for the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, the very body that oversees homeowners associations across the state, I thought. I'd seen every flavor of HOA drama imaginable, but nothing prepared me for the nightmare that unfolded in my own backyard. My wife, Laura, and I had moved here 5 years ago after my promotion, seeking a quiet place to raise our daughter, Sophie. At 12 years old, Sophie had been living with cerebral palsy since birth, relying on her wheelchair for mobility and a specially adapted ramp we installed at our front door to get in and out independently. That ramp wasn't just a convenience. It was her lifeline to the world, a symbol of the fierce independence we'd fought to instill in her despite the challenges. We imagined lazy days by the community pool, neighborhood barbecues, and Sophie wheeling around with friends. Instead, we got Karen Hargrove, the HOA president whose iron-fisted rule turned our dream home into a battlefield. Little did she know, her overreach would lead to a tragedy that shattered our family, and, ultimately, her downfall. From the start, Oakwood Meadows seemed idyllic. The HOA promised harmonious living with rules that kept everything picture-perfect. No mismatched mailboxes, approved flower beds only, and strict guidelines on home modifications. Laura and I were fine with that. We weren't rebels. But when we applied for permission to build Sophie's ramp, Karen denied it outright. "It doesn't match the aesthetic standards," her email read, cold and impersonal. Visible modifications must blend seamlessly with the community's colonial revival theme. I remember staring at the screen, my coffee growing cold as anger bubbled up. Sophie needed that ramp. Her old portable one was rickety, and doctors had warned us about fall risks. We appealed, submitting medical letters and architect plans showing how we'd paint it to match the house. Karen called a board meeting where she paraded photos of our unsightly proposal, her voice dripping with faux concern. "We must preserve property values for all residents," she said, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the table. The board, a group of her cronies, sided with her. We were fined $50 a day until we complied by removing the temporary ramp we'd put up in desperation. The emotional toll hit fast. Sophie, with her bright blue eyes and infectious laugh, started withdrawing. "Why can't I go outside like everyone else, Dad?" she'd ask, her voice small as she stared out the window at kids biking past. Laura, a nurse who worked long shifts, came home exhausted, only to argue with me about fighting the HOA. "Marcus, use your position," she'd plead. But I hesitated. As Assistant Commissioner, I oversaw complaints against HOAs statewide, but intervening personally felt like a conflict of interest. I wanted to handle it like any other homeowner, through appeals and patience. But Karen escalated. She started patrolling our street in her golf cart, binoculars in hand, noting every violation. A toy left on the lawn, our recycling bin out too early. Notes appeared on our door. Non-compliant exterior alteration. Fine imminent. The stress mounted. My blood pressure spiked, and Laura lost sleep worrying about Sophie. One evening, after a grueling day reviewing HOA fraud cases at work, I came home to find Sophie trying to navigate the portable ramp alone. Laura was at work, and I'd forgotten to secure it properly. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Karen's golf cart idling nearby. She was yelling at Sophie, who was halfway up the ramp. "That eyesore needs to come down now. It's ruining the neighborhood." Sophie, startled, lost her grip. The wheelchair tipped, and she tumbled backward, hitting the concrete with a sickening thud. I raced over, heart in my throat, as Karen stood frozen. Sophie's cries pierced the air. Blood trickled from her head, and she clutched her back in agony. Paramedics rushed her to the ER, where scans revealed a fractured spine, exacerbating her condition, requiring surgery and months of rehab. Doctors said the fall could have been prevented with a stable ramp. As I sat by her hospital bed, holding her tiny hand while she whimpered through the pain, rage consumed me. This wasn't just bureaucracy. It was negligence bordering on cruelty. Karen had pushed too far. In the days that followed, guilt gnawed at me. Why hadn't I acted sooner? Laura blamed herself for not being home, but I knew the real culprit was Karen's power trip. We filed a police report for harassment, but it went nowhere. Karen claimed she was enforcing rules and hadn't touched Sophie. The HOA board circled the wagons, sending a sympathy card that reeked of insincerity while upholding the denial. Friends suggested suing, but as assistant commissioner, I had a better weapon: knowledge of the system. I started discreetly reviewing Oakwood's HOA documents at work, spotting irregularities, unapproved fee hikes, selective enforcement. But I needed more. Late nights, I'd pore over state statutes, my office lamp casting long shadows as I balanced work cases with this personal vendetta. Sophie, home now with a back brace, became my motivation. "Dad, make her stop being mean," she'd say, her drawings shifting from sunny scenes to dark figures with clipboards. Tension built as Karen doubled down. She fined us for creating a hazard with the portable ramp, ignoring the accident. Neighbors whispered support, but feared retaliation. One couple had been driven out after challenging her over a fence color. I reached out anonymously to a few, gathering stories. Forged meeting minutes, misused dues for Karen's community events that were really her backyard parties. The puzzle pieces formed. Karen wasn't just petty. She was corrupt. Laura and I argued about going public. "You're the assistant commissioner. End this," she'd hiss. But I wanted ironclad proof, a takedown that would stick. One rainy night, as thunder rolled, I discovered a bombshell in the HOA's financials, obtained through a public records request. Thousands diverted to Karen's personal contractor for repairs that never happened. The turning point came when Sophie, in physical therapy, pushed through pain to wheel herself a few feet. Her determination ignited mine. I confided in my boss, the commissioner, who greenlit an official investigation but urged discretion. "Handle it clean, Marcus." I hired a private attorney, Elena, specializing in HOA disputes, and we built a case: violation of ADA standards by denying the ramp, negligence in the accident, and financial misconduct. We planned meticulously: gather witnesses, document everything, then strike at the annual HOA meeting. Karen, oblivious, continued her reign, even sending a notice about our overgrown hedges, while Sophie recovered. As fall approached, leaves turning gold, the neighborhood buzzed with unease. Karen announced a beautification initiative, code for more fines. I attended incognito board meetings, noting her manipulations. One neighbor, Tom, a retired cop, slipped me audio of Karen admitting to creative accounting. The net tightened. Laura and I shared quiet moments on the porch, watching Sophie practice with her therapist, our resolve hardening. This wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was justice for our girl, for every family she'd bullied. But the real hook? Karen had no idea who I was beyond that stubborn homeowner. At work, I fielded complaints about her HOA, building a dossier. The climax loomed, the meeting where we'd unveil everything. My hands shook as I rehearsed, but Sophie's smile fueled me. Little did Karen know, her empire was crumbling. The weeks after Sophie's accident were a haze of hospital visits, physical therapy appointments, and sleepless nights. Our home in Oakwood Meadows, once a haven, felt like a prison under Karen Hargrove's relentless scrutiny. Every morning, I'd check the mailbox, dreading another HOA notice. Sure enough, they came like clockwork. $100 for improper ramp storage, $75 for lawn maintenance violations, because our grass grew a half-inch too long while we were at the hospital. Laura's eyes, red from crying, burned with fury as she read them. "She's punishing us for Sophie's fall," she said, crumpling the latest fine in her fist. I nodded, my jaw tight. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was waging war, exploiting our grief to tighten her grip. Sophie, still in her back brace, would wheel to the window, watching kids play across the street, her face a mix of longing and resignation. "I just want to go outside, Dad," she'd whisper. Each word cut deeper than the fines. As assistant commissioner, I knew the legal limits of HOA power, but my position made me cautious. Any move I made had to be above reproach, or Karen could spin it as abuse of authority. Karen's campaign intensified. She started holding emergency HOA meetings, rallying her loyalists with tales of our defiance, threatening Oakwood's prestige. One neighbor, Jenny, a single mom who'd faced Karen's wrath over a non-compliant porch light, slipped me minutes from a meeting we weren't invited to. Karen had called our ramp an eyesore that devalued the entire block. She even hinted at legal action to force its removal, claiming it violated some vague safety code. I caught her golf cart idling outside our house at odd hours, her binoculars glinting in the sun as she jotted notes. Once, I saw her snap a photo of Sophie struggling to maneuver the portable ramp, her face twisted in a smirk. It took every ounce of restraint not to confront her then and there. Instead, I saved the security footage, my hands shaking with rage. This wasn't just about rules anymore. It was personal. Laura and I started fighting back quietly. I met with Elena, our lawyer, in her cluttered downtown office, surrounded by stacks of HOA case files. She pored over Sophie's medical records, our deed, and the ADA guidelines. "Karen's denial of the ramp violates federal law," she said, her pen tapping the desk. "And her negligence contributed to the accident. We can sue for damages, but let's hit broader. Expose her pattern of abuse." Elena suggested a two-pronged approach, a civil suit for Sophie's injuries and an official complaint to my department for HOA misconduct. I hesitated, worried about optics. "If I file as assistant commissioner, it could look like I'm weaponizing my job," I said. Elena leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Then don't. File as Marcus Reynolds, homeowner. But use what you know." That night, I dug deeper into Oakwood's financials, cross-referencing Karen's consulting fees with state records. The contractor she paid? Her brother-in-law. The community events? Catered parties at her house, billed to HOA dues. The neighborhood was stirring. In our group chat, now 15 households strong, stories poured in. Tom, the retired cop, shared how Karen fined him $300 for a non-approved flagpole honoring his veteran son. Jenny revealed she'd paid $200 for a late fee on dues she'd mailed on time. Others chimed in. Fines for kids' chalk drawings, threats over unruly pets. It was a pattern of control, not governance. We needed more than anecdotes, though. I spent late nights at my home office, the glow of my laptop illuminating stacks of HOA bylaws. One clause stood out. The board could be audited by a third party if 51% of residents demanded it. Karen had dodged audits for years, claiming budget constraints. With Elena's help, we drafted a petition for a forensic audit, citing mismanagement. By week's end, we had 42 signatures, 9 short but close. Karen sensed the noose tightening. She sent an HOA newsletter, glossy and full color, announcing a community enhancement fund to beautify Oakwood, code for more of her pet projects. She also posted signs, "Support your HOA. Report violations," with a hotline that went straight to her. One evening, she knocked on our door, her smile syrupy. "Marcus, let's resolve this amicably," she said, offering to waive our fines if we removed the ramp. I stared, incredulous. You think we'll trade our daughter's safety for your approval? She bristled, muttering about legal consequences, then left. Laura, overhearing, slammed the door behind her. She's scared, she said. Good. We planned a neighborhood meeting. Not an HOA one, but ours, at Tom's house. 30 residents showed up, crowding his living room, the air thick with coffee and anger. I shared Sophie's story, holding up a photo of her in her brace, her smile defiant despite the pain. This is what Karen's rules did, I said, voice cracking. Jenny spoke next, tears in her eyes, about skipping meals to pay fines. Tom played his audio of Karen's creative accounting comment. Gasps filled the room. We passed out petition forms, gaining 5 more signatures. Elena outlined our plan. Present the audit demand at the annual HOA meeting, file the ADA suit, and report Karen's misconduct to my department anonymously. She'll fight dirty, Elena warned. Be ready. Karen's next move was predictable but vicious. She sent a cease and desist letter claiming our unauthorized meeting violated HOA rules. She also filed a complaint with the city, alleging our ramp was an unpermitted structure. The city inspector, a friend of Tom's, dismissed it after seeing our permits, but the stress was relentless. Laura started having migraines. I barely slept, haunted by Sophie's fall. One night, as I tucked her in, she grabbed my hand. Dad, will we win? Her eyes, so like Laura's, held a flicker of hope. We will, kiddo, I promised, my throat tight. I didn't know how, but I knew we couldn't lose. Not for her. The audit petition gained traction, hitting 48 signatures. Elena uncovered more. Karen had bypassed board approval for a $10,000 landscaping contract, funneled to her cousin's company. At work, I quietly fed tips to my team's investigators, keeping my name out. The annual meeting was 3 weeks away, and we planned to drop everything: petition, financial proof, Sophie's story. Karen kept up her facade, hosting a community barbecue, HOA funded, naturally, to sway residents. I went, blending in, watching her glad-hand neighbors while avoiding my gaze. Her confidence was infuriating, but it fueled me. She thought she was untouchable. She didn't know I was the assistant commissioner, with access to every HOA regulation in Florida. The meeting would be her reckoning. As the days ticked down, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Karen's signs multiplied, but so did our allies. Sophie started therapy sessions outside, wheeling onto the lawn with her therapist's help, her laughter a reminder of what we were fighting for. Laura and I stole moments on the porch, planning, strategizing, holding each other up. The stakes felt impossibly high. Our home, our daughter's future, our community's freedom. But we were ready to fight, and Karen was about to learn who she'd crossed. The air in Oakwood Meadows grew heavier as the annual HOA meeting loomed, just 2 weeks away. Every day felt like a chess match, with Karen Hargrove making calculated moves to tighten her grip on the neighborhood, while Laura, Sophie, and I built our case with surgical precision. Karen's harassment didn't let up. She'd taken to driving her golf cart past our house at dawn, her horn blaring as if daring us to react. New fines arrived, $150 for excessive outdoor equipment, Sophie's therapy walker, left on the porch for an hour, $200 for non-approved signage, a small Get Well Sophie banner from neighbors. Laura tore up the notices, her hands trembling with rage. She's taunting us, she said, her voice low so Sophie wouldn't hear. I nodded, my stomach churning. As assistant commissioner, I'd seen HOAs bend rules, but Karen's vendetta was personal. She wanted us broken, not just compliant. Sophie, still in her back brace, sensed the tension. Is the mean lady mad at us again? She asked one evening, her pencil pausing over a drawing of a dark figure holding a clipboard. I forced a smile, promising her we'd fix it, but inside I was seething. This wasn't just about our ramp anymore. It was about protecting our daughter's spirit. Our group chat swelled to 25 households, a quiet rebellion brewing in texts and late-night meetups. Neighbors shared more dirt. Karen had rejected a veteran's request for a wheelchair-accessible garden path, citing aesthetic concerns, and fined a young couple for a non-compliant mailbox they couldn't afford to replace. Tom, the retired cop, became our unofficial strategist, his gruff voice steadying the group. "She's scared," he said at a meeting in his garage, the air thick with motor oil and resolve. "That's why she's hitting harder." He'd caught Karen tampering with the community bulletin board, removing our petition flyers. Jenny, the single mom, brought screenshots of Karen's emails threatening legal action against anyone disrupting HOA harmony. The stories fueled our fire, but we needed more signatures for the audit petition. We hit 50. One shy of the 51% needed to force it through. Every door I knocked on felt like a gamble. Some neighbors slammed doors, loyal to Karen, or just scared. Elena, our lawyer, was a whirlwind of focus. She met us weekly at a coffee shop, away from prying eyes, her laptop open to spreadsheets of Karen's financial missteps. The $10,000 landscaping contract to her cousin's company was just the start. Elena found $15,000 more in consulting fees to a shell company tied to Karen's sister. "This is embezzlement," Elena said, her voice sharp with excitement. "We present this at the meeting, and she's toast." She drafted a formal ADA complaint detailing how Karen's ramp denial violated federal law and contributed to Sophie's injury. The civil suit for negligence was nearly ready, with medical records and witness statements from neighbors who saw the accident. But Elena warned us, Karen's got allies on the board. They'll fight dirty. Expect character attacks. She was right. Karen started spreading rumors, whispering to neighbors that I was abusing my government job to dodge rules. It stung, especially since I'd been meticulous about keeping my assistant commissioner role separate. At work, I walked a tightrope. My team was investigating Oakwood's HOA based on my anonymous tips, but I couldn't be seen steering it. During a staff meeting, my boss, the commissioner, pulled me aside. "Marcus, I know it's your neighborhood. Stay clean, but keep us posted." I nodded, my throat tight. Back home, Laura and I turned our dining room into a war room. Maps of the property, HOA bylaws, and financial records spread across the table. We planned the meeting like a military operation. I'd open with Sophie's story to hook emotions. Elena would present the legal case, and Tom would reveal the financial dirt. We'd end with the petition, demanding an audit and a board recall. The goal wasn't just to win, it was to dismantle Karen's empire. Karen, oblivious to the storm brewing, kept up her facade. She hosted a neighborhood safety seminar, using HOA funds to rent a tent and caterer. Her niece's company, naturally. I went, blending in, my phone recording as she preached about rule enforcement for everyone's benefit. When a neighbor asked about our ramp, she deflected, saying, "Some families choose non-compliance over safety." My blood boiled, but I stayed silent, catching Tom's eye across the crowd. He nodded. He'd heard it too. That night, we got the 51st signature from Mrs. Patel, a quiet widow who'd been fined for her grandson's tricycle. "Karen's gone too far," she said, her pen shaking as she signed. The petition was complete, but we held off submitting it until the meeting for maximum impact. The emotional weight was crushing. Laura started waking up with nightmares, reliving Sophie's fall. I'd find her at 2 a.m., staring at the lake through our window, whispering, "We should have fought sooner." Sophie's therapy was grueling. She'd wince through exercises but push on, her determination humbling me. One afternoon, she wheeled out to the lawn, sunlight catching her blonde hair, and said, "Dad, when we win, can we have a party by the lake?" Her hope was a knife to my heart, but it fueled me. I promised her a celebration, picturing her laughing on a stable ramp, free from Karen's shadow. Karen's final salvo came a week before the meeting. She sent a letter to all residents, claiming our disruptive actions threatened a lawsuit that could raise everyone's dues. She even knocked on our door, her smile venomous. "Marcus, drop this nonsense, or you'll regret it," she said, eyeing Sophie's walker inside. I shut the door, my hands clenched. Laura, furious, wanted to confront her, but I held her back. "We'll do it at the meeting," I said. "She'll regret crossing us." We rallied the group chat, sharing Karen's letter to expose her scare tactics. Neighbors responded with fire emojis and promises to show up. The tide was turning, but doubt lingered. What if Karen's loyalists outnumbered us? What if she twisted the truth again? Elena prepped us for every scenario, role-playing Karen's arguments. We printed handouts. Sophie's medical records, redacted. The deed. The financial discrepancies. Tom recruited 2 more witnesses, a couple who'd been fined for a non-approved shed, to speak at the meeting. The neighborhood buzzed with anticipation, like static before a storm. Karen's signs multiplied. Protect our community. But so did our resolve. Sophie drew a new picture. A bright lake, with kids playing. No dark figures in sight. It was a reminder of what we were fighting for. As the meeting neared, I felt the weight of my dual roles, dad and assistant commissioner, converging. Karen thought she was untouchable, but she didn't know the full extent of my resources. The stage was set for a showdown she'd never see coming. The final days before the annual HOA meeting felt like the countdown to a reckoning. Oakwood Meadows was a pressure cooker, with Karen Hargrove doubling down on her campaign of intimidation while our coalition of neighbors grew bolder, fueled by years of pent-up frustration. Every morning, I'd wake to the sound of Karen's golf cart buzzing down our street, her eyes scanning for any excuse to slap us with another fine. The latest was a $250 penalty for unauthorized outdoor furniture, because Sophie's therapy chair was left on the lawn during a session. Laura ripped the notice off the door, her face pale with fury. "She's targeting Sophie now," she said, her voice trembling. I pulled her into a hug, my own anger simmering, but I urged calm. "We're almost there," I said. "She's desperate because she knows we're close." As assistant commissioner, I'd seen HOAs crumble under scrutiny, but this was personal. Karen had hurt my daughter, and every fine felt like a fresh wound. Sophie, pushing through her therapy with gritted teeth, became our anchor. "I want to help, Dad," she said, clutching a crayon drawing of our house by the lake, a new ramp gleaming in bright colors. That image burned in my mind as we prepped for the showdown. Karen's tactics grew more brazen. She sent an email blast to all residents, accusing certain troublemakers of undermining community values and hinting at a special assessment to cover legal costs from our frivolous complaints. It was a scare tactic, but it backfired. Neighbors flooded our group chat with screenshots, furious at the threat of higher dues. Tom, our retired cop ally, reported that Karen had cornered him at the community pool, warning him to stay out of it or face a fine for his non-compliant garage door. Jenny, the single mom, found a note on her car. "Watch your step." The intimidation was blatant, but it only hardened our resolve. Our group chat, now 30 households strong, buzzed with plans. We needed to nail the meeting. Every word, every slide, every moment had to hit like a sledgehammer. Elena, our lawyer, was relentless. She met us at a park outside Oakwood to avoid Karen's spies. her briefcase stuffed with evidence. She'd finalized the ADA complaint, detailing how Karen's ramp denial violated federal law and directly led to Sophie's spinal injury. The civil suit was ready, with affidavits from neighbors who witnessed the accident and medical reports projecting Sophie's recovery costs at over $100,000. But the real bombshell was the financial audit petition, now with 53 signatures, well over the 51% needed. Elena had cross-referenced Karen's consulting fees with bank records, confirming $25,000 funneled to her relatives' companies for non-existent work. "This is felony-level fraud," Elena said, her eyes gleaming. "We present this, and she's done." She crafted a presentation for the meeting. My opening about Sophie's accident, Tom's audio of Karen's creative accounting, and the financials projected on a screen for all to see. We'd end with a call for a board recall, nominating Tom, Jenny, and Mrs. Patel. At work, I walked a razor's edge. My team's investigation into Oakwood's HOA was gaining steam, with auditors combing through years of records based on my anonymous tips. I kept my involvement minimal, passing tips through a colleague to avoid suspicion. My boss called me in, his brow furrowed. "Marcus, this Oakwood case is explosive. If you're too close, recuse yourself." I nodded, assuring him I was just a homeowner fighting for my kid. But at home, the lines blurred. Laura and I spent nights rehearsing, turning our dining room into a command center. We printed 100 copies of our handouts, Sophie's photo in her brace, the deed showing our ramp's legality, and a timeline of Karen's fines. Sophie overheard us one night, wheeling in. "Will you tell them about me, Dad?" she asked. I knelt beside her. "Every word, kiddo." Her smile was worth every sleepless night. Karen's desperation peaked. She announced a pre-meeting town hall to clarify HOA policies, clearly aiming to sway undecided residents. I attended, blending into the back, my phone recording. Karen stood under a rented canopy, her voice syrupy as she promised new community perks funded by reallocated dues. When someone asked about our ramp, she lied. The Reynolds family refused to submit proper plans. I bit my tongue, catching Tom's eye. He was recording too. Neighbors grumbled, some whispering support for us. That night, our group chat exploded with new allies, pushing our signatures to 55. Mrs. Patel brought cookies to our house, her voice soft but firm. "My grandson deserves a safe neighborhood. We're with you." Her words felt like a lifeline. The emotional toll was brutal. Laura's migraines worsened. She'd flinch at every golf cart hum, expecting another fine. I'd lie awake, replaying Sophie's fall, guilt gnawing at me for not acting sooner. One evening, Sophie wheeled to the porch, watching fireflies over the lake. "When we win, can I have a new ramp with blue paint?" she asked. I laughed, tears pricking my eyes. "Any color you want." That promise drove me. We planned a final push, a neighborhood flyer drop, anonymous to avoid Karen's wrath, with Sophie's story and a call to vote for change. We slipped them into mailboxes at midnight, adrenaline pumping. Karen retaliated with her own flyers, accusing us of spreading lies and endangering property values. But her tone was frantic, her grip slipping. The day before the meeting, Karen made a bold move. She filed a countersuit against us for defamation, claiming our petition was slanderous. Elena laughed when she saw it. "She's grasping at straws. This won't hold up." Still, it rattled us. Legal fees could drain our savings, already stretched by Sophie's medical bills. At work, I got a call from my team. The auditors had found $30,000 in unaccounted HOA funds, enough for a criminal referral. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was soaring. We had her. The meeting was our chance to end it, not just for Sophie, but for every neighbor she'd bullied. As the sun set the night before, Laura and I sat with Sophie, reading her favorite book about a brave girl who slays a dragon. She giggled, pointing at the dragon. "That's Karen, right?" We laughed, but the truth hit hard. Karen was our dragon, and tomorrow we'd face her with everything we had. The neighborhood was a tinderbox, Karen's loyalists versus our coalition, with undecided residents holding the balance. My role as assistant commissioner stayed hidden, my ace in the hole. Karen thought she was fighting a stubborn dad. She had no idea she'd crossed someone who knew every rule she'd broken. The stage was set, and we were ready to bring her empire down. The annual HOA meeting was set for a sticky Saturday evening in the Oakwood Meadows Community Center, a low brick building that smelled of mildew and old coffee. The air buzzed with tension, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Laura and I arrived early, arms loaded with handouts, Sophie's photo, our deed, the financial records exposing Karen's fraud. Sophie stayed home with a sitter, her words echoing in my mind. "Tell them about me, Dad." As assistant commissioner, I'd seen HOAs implode under less pressure, but this was different. This was personal. Karen Hargrove had crossed a line when she caused Sophie's fall, and tonight we'd expose her. The room filled fast. Over 80 residents packed the folding chairs, a mix of our allies, Karen's loyalists, and curious fence-sitters. Whispers rippled as we set up our projector, Elena's laptop glowing with our presentation. Karen stood at the podium, her blonde bob flawless, her smile a mask of control, but her eyes darted nervously. She knew something was coming. Saturdays. Meeting opened with Karen's usual spiel about community pride and upholding standards. She touted her beautification fund, conveniently omitting its ties to her cousin's company. When she mentioned our ramp, her voice dripped with pity. "Some residents choose to flout rules, endangering safety," she said, glancing at me. My pulse raced, but I kept my face neutral, catching Tom's nod from the front row. Our turn came. I stepped to the podium, heart pounding, and started with Sophie. "My daughter Sophie is 12. She has cerebral palsy and needs a ramp to leave our home." Karen denied it, saying it clashed with the neighborhood's look. Because of that, Sophie fell, fracturing her spine. I held up her photo, her smile bright despite the brace. The room went silent, a few gasps breaking through. "This isn't just our fight, it's yours too. How many of you have paid unfair fines?" Hands shot up, murmurs growing. Elena took over, her voice sharp as she projected our deed. "The Reynolds ramp is legal on their property. Karen's denial violates the ADA, and her negligence led to a child's injury." She clicked to the financials. $30,000 in unaccounted dues, checks to Karen's relatives. "This is your money, misused." The room erupted, angry shouts, chairs scraping. Tom stood, playing his audio of Karen bragging about creative accounting. Her face went ashen, her hands gripping the podium. "This is slander," she shrieked, but the crowd wasn't buying it. Jenny, the single mom, stood, tears streaming. "You fined me for a porch light I couldn't afford to change." "I skipped meals for my kids." Others joined in, a veteran, a widow, a young couple, all sharing stories of Karen's tyranny. The room was a powder keg, and we'd lit the fuse. Karen tried to regain control, banging her gavel. "This is an ambush! I've served this community for years." But her voice cracked, her composure slipping. I stepped forward, holding up the audit petition with 55 signatures. "We demand a forensic audit and a board recall," I said, voice steady. "You've abused your power too long." The crowd roared approval, drowning out Karen's protests. Her loyalists, a small knot of older residents, tried to defend her, but they were outnumbered. Elena laid out the ADA violation, the negligence suit, and the state investigation, carefully omitting my role as assistant commissioner. Karen's eyes widened. She hadn't seen that coming. "You can't do this!" she sputtered, but the tide had turned. The vote was called. Residents lined up to cast ballots, the air thick with anticipation. Laura squeezed my hand, her nails digging in. I thought of Sophie, her drawing of a blue ramp, her hope for a party by the lake. Every signature, every story, every late night had led to this. The tally took forever. Each vote read aloud. 67 for the audit and recall, 14 against. Cheers erupted as Karen slumped in her chair, her clipboard abandoned. New board candidates, Tom, Jenny, and Mrs. Patel, were nominated and elected in a landslide. Karen tried one last stand, threatening a lawsuit, but Elena shut her down. "You're welcome to try, but the evidence is overwhelming." Karen stormed out, her heels clicking furiously, as neighbors swarmed us with hugs and thanks. After the meeting, the energy lingered. Neighbors stayed late, sharing stories, some crying, others laughing in relief. Tom clapped my shoulder. "You did it, Marcus. But it wasn't just me. It was all of us." Back home, Laura and I called Sophie, telling her we'd won. "Does this mean I get my ramp?" she asked, her voice bright. "Blue paint and all," I promised, my throat tight. The next day, Elena filed the ADA suit, and my office received the audit petition, triggering a formal investigation. Karen's empire was crumbling, and I hadn't even played my commissioner card. That was my secret weapon, held for the right moment. The victory felt raw, hard-won, but incomplete. Sophie's recovery was ongoing, and the neighborhood needed healing. As I looked out at the lake, moonlight glinting off the water, I knew the real fight was just beginning. Rebuilding a community free from fear. The emotional weight didn't lift immediately. Laura's migraines eased, but she'd still wake at night, checking Sophie's brace. I carried guilt for not acting sooner, replaying Sophie's fall in my mind. But the neighborhood shifted. Neighbors waved again, kids played without looking over their shoulders, and our group chat turned from rebellion to plans for a community picnic. On our terms. Karen's signs disappeared, replaced by flyers for the new board's first meeting. Sophie started sketching again, her drawings full of color. Kids, ramps, lakes. It was a start, but the final blow was coming, and Karen would never see it. The weeks following the HOA meeting felt like the first deep breath after being underwater too long. Oakwood Meadows buzzed with a cautious optimism, as if the neighborhood was waking from a bad dream. Karen Hargrove's reign was over, but the scars she'd left, on our family, on Sophie, on the community, lingered like bruises. As assistant commissioner, I'd seen HOAs reform after a shakeup, but this victory was personal. Sophie's fall, her fractured spine, and the months of fear had changed us. Yet her resilience, her bright smile as she wheeled through therapy, kept us grounded. The new board, Tom, Jenny, and Mrs. Patel, hit the ground running, repealing Karen's petty fines and rewriting rules to prioritize fairness. Our ramp was approved within days, painted blue as Sophie wanted, its sturdy frame a symbol of her independence reclaimed. But the fight wasn't over. Karen's countersuit loomed, and the state's audit of Oakwood's HOA, triggered by our petition, was digging deeper. I kept my role as assistant commissioner hidden, letting the evidence speak. This was about justice, not revenge, though the line blurred in my quieter moments. Karen didn't go quietly. She sent a defiant email to residents, claiming she'd stepped back for personal reasons, but would vigorously defend her reputation. Rumors swirled that she was selling her house, her golf cart absent from its usual patrols. Neighbors reported seeing her at the community center, shredding papers late at night. Tom, ever the cop, caught her on camera, and we passed it to Elena. "She's covering her tracks," Elena said, her voice sharp with anticipation. The audit results came a week later, and they were damning. $35,000 in misappropriated dues, mostly funneled to Karen's relatives through fake contracts. The state referred the case for criminal investigation, and my office, carefully walled off from my involvement, assigned a prosecutor. Karen was served a notice to appear for questioning. Her name splashed across local news blogs. The headline, HOA President Faces Fraud Probe, felt like a weightlifting. Our civil suit for Sophie's injuries moved forward. Elena presented a mountain of evidence: medical bills, witness statements, and Karen's own emails denying the ramp. The judge, a no-nonsense woman, was unimpressed by Karen's countersuit, dismissing it as baseless. We settled out of court for $120,000, enough to cover Sophie's rehab and a trust for her future care. It wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it as a mutual agreement, but the neighborhood knew the truth. At a community picnic we hosted by the lake, over 60 residents showed up, kids splashing in the shallows, adults swapping stories of Karen's downfall. Sophie wheeled out on her new ramp, her laughter ringing as she tossed a beach ball with friends. Laura squeezed my hand, her migraines finally fading. "We did it," she whispered. I nodded, but the victory was bittersweet. Sophie's recovery would be long, and no settlement could erase her pain. The new board transformed Oakwood. They held open meetings, posted transparent budgets, and created a fund for accessibility upgrades, inspired by Sophie. Neighbors started hosting barbecues again, unafraid of fines. Jenny, now treasurer, found $5,000 more in unaccounted funds, which we voted to use for a playground upgrade. Mrs. Patel led a committee to revise the HOA charter, ensuring no one could wield unchecked power again. Tom, as president, was a steady hand, his gruff humor a stark contrast to Karen's tyranny. One evening he pulled me aside, handing me a beer. "You never told us you're the assistant commissioner," he said, eyebrow raised. I froze, then laughed. "Didn't need to. This was about us, not my job." He clapped my shoulder, and we watched the sun set over the lake, kids' laughter echoing. Karen's reckoning came quietly. The criminal investigation led to charges: embezzlement and fraud, with a potential 5-year sentence. She pleaded guilty to lesser charges, avoiding jail but paying hefty fines and restitution. Her house sold, and she moved out of state, her name a cautionary tale in Oakwood. I never revealed my role, letting the system work. At work, my boss commended the investigation's thoroughness, unaware of my shadow involvement. It felt right. Justice won on its merits, not my title. But the emotional toll lingered. Laura and I would catch each other staring at Sophie's old drawings, the dark ones with clipboards, now replaced by bright lakes and ramps. We'd won, but the memory of Sophie's fall, the sound of her cries, haunted us. One crisp fall evening, we held Sophie's promised lake party. Neighbors brought potluck dishes, kids raced around, and Sophie, stronger now, wheeled to the water's edge, her blue ramp gleaming under string lights. She tossed a pebble into the lake, grinning as it skipped. "We beat the dragon, Dad," she said, referencing her favorite book. I hugged her, tears pricking my eyes. "You're the real hero, kiddo." The community felt whole again, but the fight had changed us. Laura and I grew closer, our trust in each other forged in battle. Sophie's spirit, unbroken despite her pain, taught us resilience. Oakwood wasn't perfect, but it was ours again. Looking back, this wasn't just about a ramp or a lawsuit. It was about standing up for what's right, for a little girl who deserved to live freely in her home. It was about a community reclaiming its voice from a bully who thought she was untouchable. Karen didn't know she'd crossed a dad who knew the system inside out. But in the end, it was Sophie's courage that carried us. Have you ever faced an HOA tyrant like Karen? Did you fight back and win? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear how you triumphed.